Hi everyone, this will be part 2 of my testimony series, and if you haven't watched the prequel of what led me to begin to share this story, or part 1, I highly suggest that you go do that first, and I'll put links to both of them down in the description box, and I'm also creating a playlist so that you can go back and listen to all of them. First thing I would like to do is thank everyone for all of the positive feedback you've given me, for the great comments you've left me. They've meant a lot, because this did take a lot of, just a lot, to come forward with this, to record this. And like I've said in my previous video, I have a lot of reasons why I have not recorded this before, and now you know, my reasons for doing it now are tenfold. I want to help somebody, and I'm hoping that this video series will reach you if you're somewhere in the middle of something that's similar to what I went through and what my family went through. I also, you know, I kind of want to document it for my children, because my 2 oldest were so little. Well, Carson has virtually no memory of any of this. He doesn't remember any of it. Brandon remembers little tiny bits, he says, but I really think that he remembers a lot of it because of stories that we've told or pictures that he's seen. So he's kind of remembering like secondary. He's not really remembering firsthand experience. So I want them to be able to hear the story. And especially for Ethan, because he came afterwards. He came after all of it. He's our little miracle baby. So anyways, yeah, that's a little bit of foreshadowing. So I think in the last video, we stopped where I was going to have the surgery, the biopsy surgery, and I had explained where I had no lymph node swelling at all anywhere in my other lymph nodes. You know, every doctor I saw checked everywhere they could to try to find an alternate place to biopsy, because it would have been less invasive. But they couldn't. So the only place they could find a lymph node to biopsy was in the middle of my chest, so right in here in the middle of my lungs. So the pulmonologist, it was a Friday, scheduled me for December 21st, which is a Monday, for the procedure. And they were originally going to go in through the front of my throat and in that way. Less invasive, quicker recovery time. Great, Christmas is coming up, right? So we spent that whole weekend getting prepared for Christmas, getting everything finished. You know how it is with Christmas and 2 little kids. So anyways, show up Monday morning with, you know, my husband took me. We showed up to the hospital Monday. And a lot of this I remember in bits and pieces. I don't remember overall a whole lot, because my anxiety was in control of me that day. But I remember showing up, registering. I remember going back to the pre-op area. I remember being nervous about the IV. So silly with what else was to come in the future. It was really, really, really small cheese in comparison. But I was scared to death of the IV. And I remember thinking in my head, I have to remember to ask them to numb the site before they stick me with the IV needle. So I'm waiting in the prep area, and they wouldn't let Todd back at the beginning. You know, the nurses, I remember the nurse coming in, chatting with her, vitals, history, this and that. I don't even really remember who else came in and out until the anesthesiologist came in. And I remember sitting on the bed in the pre-op area. And he came in, introduces himself, and he's telling me, you know, they go over the risks, and it can range from so minute to death when you go through general anesthesia. That's not a big deal. Well, I mean, it's a big deal, but that's typical, right? So he's talking about all of this, and then he says, "Do you have any questions?" I said, "Yes, I do. I want to know, are you going to put a tube down my throat?" As an adult, I had never gone through general anesthesia, so I was a little bit worried about having a sore throat after my procedure. Another silly thing, because he answers me and he says, "Oh yes, we're going to put a tube down your throat, and actually, it's going to be a one-sided tube." A one-sided tube? Like, that doesn't... I couldn't comprehend that. And I must have looked at him like he was crazy, because he goes on to tell me, "We have to put a one-sided tube down your throat because we have to keep your right lung inflated while we deflate your left lung." Wait a minute. Let's back it up a little bit. Because on Friday, the surgeon tells me, "We're going in this way. Less invasive, quicker recovery time. Simple, we're going to go down behind the collarbone and grab and go." Okay? This ain't what we talked about. So now I am freaking out. My anxiety is through the roof. You're talking about deflating a lung. And here I was worried about an IV. Where's my husband? You know, I had no support person back there, and he had just told me this. And I said, "What do you mean you have to deflate a lung?" I was just totally floored and speechless. And really, honestly, I'll be honest, I don't really remember much after that because it caught me so off guard. So the anesthesiologist says, "Well, the surgeon will talk to you when he comes in." That's not good enough for me because I am freaking out. Freaking out. And I have no support person in there with me. Like I said, everything from then on out really is a blur. I vaguely remember the nurse coming in. I vaguely remember my surgeon coming in and him explaining to me why he decided to change the approach. I don't remember at what point my husband came in. I was so anxiety ridden. I don't even remember them putting the IV in me. I have no recollection. So they took me back. I don't remember going back to the OR. I don't remember them initiating any kind of anesthesia. Usually, you know, you can remember that kind of thing. I've had surgeries before, not general anesthesia, but, you know, the sedation that they give you where you fall asleep. And I've had surgeries since then, obviously, where they've given me sedation where I've fallen asleep. And I remember the prep. I remember being wheeled back, and usually I wake up in the middle of it. That's just how my body is. But this, I don't remember nothing. The next thing I remember is waking up in the post-op room, the recovery room. I remember a very loud nurse yelling my name. At least it sounded like she was yelling it. I guess she wasn't really yelling it, but it sounded that way to me. And I didn't want to wake up. That anesthesia was so nice. I remember other patients being in there. I remember a male voice. He wasn't very happy. The female patient voice was not very happy. She sounded in pain. I remember that. I remember, you know, that one nurse just continuing to bug me to wake up. I was very mad. And then came the time to move me to my room. And if you've ever had lung surgery and you've had your lung deflated, or if you've had a lung collapse, then you know what it feels like to not be able to breathe, to feel like you're drowning. Because to move me, now remember this was in 2004, now hopefully the technology has gotten a little better and they can keep the electricity on the chest tube pump and all that going to keep your lung inflated when they move you around, but back in 2004 they did not. So they had to turn off the pumps that kept my lung inflated while they moved me. And the chest tube was not draining either. So I basically felt like I was drowning. I remember that very vividly. And if I was not awake before, I woke up then. I remember the elevator ride up. And yeah, the practitioners tried to keep me smiling, you know. It's okay, dear. You're not really dying, dear. Not yet. That kind of thing. Not a fun thing. So it finally gets settled in my room. Everything's turned back on. Eventually I feel like I can breathe again, which is good, and I fall back to sleep. Now over this time period I'm in and out, in and out, in and out. I have a morphine pump, and I remember the best thing ever was the long booty things they put on your feet. They put them on your feet and they go all the way up your calves to your knees, and they inflate and then they deflate and then they inflate. Oh my goodness, those are some of the best things ever created by man. Whew. I was so upset when they took those off. I wanted to keep them. But anyways, those are to keep blood clots from forming in your legs while you're still somewhat sedated and you're unable to get up and walk around right after surgery. And I remember when my husband came in to the room and they got preliminary test results back on me. Now, this is a teaching hospital, and they have people that are on the ball because they're constantly, it's research. They're learning, they're researching things all the time, and so we got our preliminary lab results back. And so he comes in, he sits down, and he wakes me up. And he says, we got the test results back. So he says, it's not what we hoped for. You have cancer. And I remember hyperventilating and pushing the morphine button. And he continued to talk. I don't remember what he said. And I shut my eyes and I just shut him out. I couldn't hear anymore. When you hear someone, and I promised myself I wasn't going to cry, when you hear those words, it changes your life, because the first thing you think of is, no way. No, that can't be me. But it was. And like I said, I went back to sleep. My hospital stay was, I can't remember how many days long. I remember I was in there at least 2 nights, and I think they asked me if I wanted to stay for a third, and I agreed to because I was in a lot of pain, and I was extremely fatigued. I had a lot of chest pain, and so I wanted to stay in longer. I actually probably would have stayed in longer if it hadn't been so close to Christmas, but I knew I needed to get home to my children, and I wanted to get home to my children. And, you know, there came the time when they had to take the chest tube out. I never had a chest tube, but Todd came in and he talked to me, and he said, they're going to come in and pull it out, and I've heard that it's extremely painful. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pray with you, and when the time comes, he's going to count to 3, and on the count of 3 he's going to pull it. At the count of 2 we're going to push the morphine pump button. said, okay. So he did. He prayed with me. The doctor came in. He got me up out of the bed into the chair and got it set up. And he explained what was going to happen, what I was going to feel, and started counting. At the count of 2, morphine was pressed. At the count of 3, he yanked, and I felt nothing. 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 Prayer works. Because while I was going through that procedure, my husband was sitting or kneeling on the floor beside the chair, and he was praying while it was going on, and I didn't feel a thing. I didn't feel anything afterwards. Nothing. So I thought I'd share that little tidbit. I remember it like it was yesterday. I didn't feel a thing. So anyways, going on with that, yes, that was a hard Christmas. It was a hard Christmas for all the adults in my family. We all knew what was going on. Everybody was down and out and very sad and upset. But we had kids. We had a lot of kids in the family at that point, and they kept us smiling and kept us going. And I did try to go back to work, and it was extremely hard. And I remember at my desk, and I just felt awful. And my boss came over to me, and she's like, "Why don't you go home?" And I said, "I can't. I didn't have any more sick time, and I can't afford to take time off without pay." And when I told her that I had one of my lungs collapsed in the surgery, she was very shocked. She didn't know. And she's like, "What are you doing here? I can't believe you're here." And she ended up making it possible. Now again, this was back in 2004, and I'm sure a lot of work policies have changed since then. But she made it possible for other employees to donate sick time to me. That got me through till the end of the year. So I was actually paid from donated sick time from other people through the end of 2004. Talking about that Christmas and the end of 2004, what was really hard, and what might be a good tip for people who have loved ones in their life who are diagnosed with things like this. Probably the worst thing for me was the looks that people would give me, including family members. They would look at me and almost start crying, or some would start crying. And I get it. You're upset. You're sad. It's not a good thing. It's not ideal. But I wasn't dead. And the looks that I was given, I was in pain. I was recovering from surgery. I was trying to deal with the diagnosis and just everything that comes with that. And then I get looks of pity or just downright sadness, and it just makes it worse. I know people mean well, but it just makes it worse. And at times I just wanted to scream at them, "I'm not dead. I'm not dead. Don't look at me like I'm dying." So please, if you know someone, or if you love someone who's diagnosed with something, not just cancer, don't look at them like they're dying or like they're dead already. So anyways, January we went to meet with my oncologist, and he was so wonderful, heaven sent. The type of physician I don't really believe that they make anymore, even though he's a relatively young physician. He was the type of physician who would just lay it out. Honest, honest, honest. Do you have questions? What are your questions? You'd ask him a question and he'd sit there for a minute and he would really think about it before he'd answer, and then he'd answer it. He related to you. He really seemed to care. On more than one occasion, he would call me right away with test results. I know you're going to be worried about this, so let me just call you now and tell you blah, blah, blah. I mean, he was just wonderful. I couldn't have asked for anyone better to take care of me and my family. So we go for our first meeting, and they have the actual test results back from the cell types and all of that. So I was officially diagnosed at that first visit with large B-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He says, this is a very fast-moving, fast-spreading lymphoma. The cancer cells are very quick to reproduce. They will eat up everything they can, which is why the weight loss. You've been feeding these cells. But the good part is that since they're so fast-moving, they will eat up the chemo, and that will kill them quicker, which is good. That's the good news, right? That's the great news. So he tells me, your chemo regimen will be, you'll come in, you'll come in one day and you'll get Rituxan, which in layman's terms he explains basically lines all the cells up and gets them all ready for the chemo. Okay, so the next day you'll come in and get the chemotherapy infused. You'll come into the clinic and it will, they'll infuse it, they'll monitor you the whole time they're infusing it, and then you can go home and you'll recover at home. Sounds good. Will my hair fall out? Yes. Least of my concerns. Honestly, it really wasn't any of my concern. Other people, same pity look, when they heard that my hair was going to fall out. Oh my God, that's the worst thing ever. To me, I could care less. I told them, I'm looking forward to seeing what I look like bald. I mean, do I have any divots, or do I have any freckles or moles? That's so cool. So, I had no problem with the hair coming out. But anyway, so he tells me this is what we're going to do. We need to get, I think I had to do a PET scan. He wanted, more scans done and so forth. So he could have his own set of staging things and blah, blah, blah. So, because I didn't have an official stage, like stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and all that yet. So I had to go get all of that done. And before they could start the actual chemo. And he asked me if I wanted, I had the option of getting the chemotherapy either intravenously or I could have a portacath put in. And I had told him I want a portacath because I felt like that was safer, in my opinion, to have the toxicity of the chemotherapy drugs put in through a portacath rather than the potential of breaking down my veins. So that's what I chose, the portacath. So he said, okay, well, we'll get the scans done. We'll come back for the results. We'll go over all the results, answer any other questions you have. We should have the staging and everything by then, and we'll have everything together, and we'll schedule your portacath and your first chemo. Okay, let's do this. So we have all of that done. Come back for the next appointment with him. And he throws us a curveball. The first chemo regimen that he had said he wanted was called CHOP, C-H-O-P. Now those are it's an acronym, so sorry, I have floral stem in my hand. So C-H-O-P. Each letter stands for the name of a drug. CHOP is one of the most common chemotherapy regimens that are given to lymphoma patients. It's pretty much the go-to. It's normally pretty easily tolerated. You might get like nausea and vomiting, hair loss, neuropathy, which is the tingling or the numbness in the fingertips and the toes. But generally people do very well with it. They can go back to work after receiving it after a couple of days. So I was really upbeat and positive about this chemo regimen and my ability to continue to function in my roles, you know, working full-time, being a mother, things like that. So he says, we need to talk about your scans. Okay. He said, I was looking at your scans and I pulled your original ones and the ones that we did here, and I sat down with all the other physicians on the tumor board, and we had a roundtable discussion. We all reviewed your records, and we've all come to the same conclusion that you have a type of lymphoma that is going to respond better to a different type of chemo. Okay, that's good, right? He said, the lymphoma that you have is mainly in your chest. It's in the middle of your lungs. And it had spread a little to other lymph nodes, but the primary site was in my chest lymph nodes. They call that primary mediastinal. The mediastinal region is that region right here. So he said you have what's called primary mediastinal large B cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Boy, that's a mouthful. He said, and you are in stage 3B. Okay. My sister-in-law had come with us at this visit too. She's a nurse and she had her notebook. She was making notes and everything, and he said, we recommend that instead of CHOP, that you have a regimen called EPOC. And okay. He said, so, but that would change it up. So you would come in one day and have the Rituxan like we planned, but then you would come in the next morning and you would be an inpatient for 5 days. So your chemotherapy will run 24 hours a day for 5 days. And my world tilted even more. That meant no work. Being away from my boys, who, mind you, in January of 2005 were only 4 and Carson wasn't even 2 yet. Life-changing? You better believe it. I had a husband who worked 12-hour swing shifts, who was gone at night. What choice did we have? The survival rate went up to 80% with this chemo regimen. It was a newer chemo regimen. Now, I mean, you're talking about 2005. Now they've perfected the delivery. I don't believe that people have, if they stay inpatient, they only do it for like 2 days, I believe. I'm not certain about that, but the long hospital stays are no more. Thank goodness. Oh, thank goodness. What a blessing for people who have to go through that now. Truly a blessing. But for us, it was life-changing. It was life-altering for all of us, for my 2 little boys. It broke my heart. But it was small-term setback for something that needed to be long-term survival. So the decision, there was no choice. So but in that visit, he's talking to us about fertility. Do you want any more children? I was like, well, before all this, yes. Now, I think surviving is number 1. So my sister-in-law asks, just curiosity, is there even time for anything like that? Like if they wanted to harvest eggs and freeze them and all this stuff. And he says, put it this way, if we don't start chemo very soon, she will be dead within a few weeks. That's how fast this moves. My sister-in-law was sitting like this, listening to him. Elbow is on the armrest. When he says that, she's like, and almost face plants. See what I said about him telling you like it is? He told us like it was. If it was urgent and important, he told us. That's how it is. That's how it was. So our journey began. Set up an appointment for the portacath. The portacath was set to be inserted, which is a surgical procedure, and they were going to leave it accessed and then immediately put me onto the oncology ward and go ahead and start my first chemo treatment right then. At that same time, I was to have a bone marrow biopsy and go from there. So, in the next part, I will start into the chemotherapy journey. I want to reflect on some things that kept me sane through the battle of depression and facing death. Thoughts of dying and, quite frankly, wanting to die. Struggling with thinking it was better that I was dead than seeing everyone around me so hurt and upset and even inconvenienced by me being in the hospital so much. There were times when I thought, just kill me. I would ask God, just kill me. They're better off without me. It's a struggle. It is a struggle for people going through it. It really is. But I'm going to end it here. My oldest son is coming by to see us for a few minutes before he goes back to school. And I want to see him. So, I'm going to end it here. And I really thank you for watching. I promise I will put part 3 up sooner than part 2. Part 2, part 1 I put up, and then it was Easter weekend and Ethan's birthday, and who wants to watch something like this on Easter weekend, right? I didn't want to talk about it on Easter weekend, to be honest. So, anyways, like I said, I'm going to end it here. I really hope that I'm helping someone, touching someone. That's the goal of this. Stay tuned for part 3. There is hope. There is a light at the end of every dark tunnel, as long as you give it all to God and you have the faith in Him. Thanks for listening, guys. I will talk to you soon.